wallet watch phone. The voice was low, desperate, trying for harshness, but a tremor betrayed the fear beneath. The small knife glinted weakly under the alley light. Hand them over. Now don't make this harder than it needs to be. Silence stretched thick with tension. The tall man in the expensive coat didn't move, didn't react. His face was mostly shadow, but his eyes were visible. Sharp, assessing, unafraid. Then his voice, dangerously smooth and calm, cut through the night air. "Predictable," he murmured almost thoughtfully. "But tell me, what happens after you run?" The South Bronx air hung thick and heavy, a gritty counterpoint to the distant, indifferent sparkle of Manhattan's skyline. Down here, hope was a currency, scarcer than dollars, and Scarlett knew its exchange rate all too well. Their tiny shack tucked away in a cramped alley felt more like a collection of loosely connected planks than a home. Rain didn't just drip through the roof. It staged invasions, turning their floor into a murky puddle. Scarlett slept on a cot that groaned under her weight, a constant reminder of the life pressing down on her. Across the small space, her Aunt Eleanor coughed a thin, rattling sound that tore at Scarlett's heart. Eleanor was meticulously hand-washing clothes in a plastic basin, her knuckles white, her skin raw from the harsh soap. She was the only family Scarlett had left, a gentle soul being slowly eroded by poverty and illness. Eleanor, are those delicates done? Yet the sharp voice belonged to Mrs. Agnes, their neighbor, and Eleanor's self-appointed employer. A woman whose generosity extended only as far as paying pennies for back-breaking labor. Don't expect full pay if I find a single wrinkle, you hear? Aunt Eleanor flinched, lowering her head further over the basin. Scarlett felt the familiar surge of protective fury. She'd seen this casual cruelty her whole life, neighbors preying on the weak, but it still made her blood boil. "Hey, Mrs. Agnes." Scarlett's voice cut through the air, sharp as broken glass. "Maybe if you paid a decent wage, Aunt Eleanor wouldn't have to wash your precious things until her hands bleed. Or here's a thought. Try washing your own unmentionables for a change." Mrs. Agnes shot her a venomous glare. "Well, listen to Miss High and Mighty. Got a sharp tongue, haven't you? If you're so concerned about your aunt's earnings, why don't you find a real job instead of flapping those lips?" Scarlett swallowed the bitter retort. A real job. If only it were that simple. That was exactly what she'd been trying to do day after grueling day. She'd walked miles, knocked on countless doors. Fast food joints, department stores, dusty diners. The answer was always the same. Polite, dismissive refusal. "Sorry, miss. No experience. We need someone with credentials. Do you even have a high school diploma?" Each rejection felt like another stone added to the weight crushing her chest. Later that day, the weight became unbearable. Scarlett returned home, empty-handed and heartsick, to find Aunt Eleanor collapsed on the floor, gasping for breath, a terrifying dark stain blossoming on the cloth she held to her mouth. Blood Aunt Eleanor. "Oh my God, what? What happened?" Scarlett cried frantically, searching their meager belongings for any hidden cash, anything of value. The small savings box held only a handful of coins, mocking her desperation. It wasn't enough for a bus fare, let alone a doctor. Panic clawed at her throat, cold and sharp. She had to do something. Anything. Leaving her aunt resting as comfortably as possible, Scarlett stumbled out into the encroaching twilight, the city lights beginning to blur through unshed tears. She walked aimlessly through the labyrinthine alleys, shadows stretching long and menacing. Her mind raced, latching onto fragments of desperate plans, each more reckless than the last. A prayer formed on her lips, raw and urgent. Not to a god she believed in, but to any force that might offer a lifeline. And then she saw him. He stood out like a diamond dropped in mud. Tall, impeccably dressed in a coat that probably cost more than their shack's rent for a year. Shoes gleaming under the weak glow of a distant streetlight. He looked lost, perhaps, but also something else. Preoccupied, tense. His jaw was tight, his gaze distant, as if wrestling with thoughts far heavier than navigating the South Bronx. He checked an expensive watch, his movement sharp, impatient. Scarlett's breath hitched. He practically radiated wealth, the watch alone. It screamed money, the answer to her desperate prayer standing right there. A dangerous, terrible answer. Her hand instinctively closed around the small, worn utility knife she carried in her pocket, more for peeling fruit than protection. But it was all she had. The desperation that had been simmering boiled over. Consuming thought, consuming fear. Before she could second-guess the madness, she stepped out from the shadows blocking his path. Her voice when it came was a low snarl she barely recognized as her own. Wrong place to get lost, buddy wallet, watch phone. Hand 'em over if you don't want this night to get a whole lot worse. The man didn't panic. He didn't even flinch. Instead, his sharp eyes, startlingly clear even in the dim light, swept over her, a quick, cold assessment from her worn sneakers to her determined, terrified face. He raised a single perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "This," he said, his voice dangerously calm, devoid of fear, carrying a chilling edge of calculation, "is your chosen solution. Rather predictable, wouldn't you say?" His lack of fear unnerved her more than any shouting would have. "Don't test me," she snapped, trying to inject bravado. She didn't feel waving the small knife. "This isn't a toothpick." A humorless smile touched his lips. "Desperation makes predictable puppets of us all," he murmured almost to himself before focusing back on her. He smoothly unclasped the gleaming watch, slipped out a thick leather wallet. "If you truly need these," he said, holding them out. His gaze piercing, analytical, "then take them." But desperation often leads to regrettable shortcuts. Scarlett snatched the items, her hand trembling, ignoring the cryptic warning, "wallet, watch, phone." She grabbed them, all the weight of them feeling both impossibly heavy and terrifyingly light. She turned and ran, feet pounding on the cracked pavement, adrenaline screaming in her ears. She didn't look back, didn't dare. She just ran, clutching the spoils of her desperate act, praying it was enough, praying she'd never see those calculating eyes again. Back in the suffocating confines of the shack, the initial rush faded, replaced by icy dread. She helped Aunt Eleanor sip some water. The older woman's breathing still shallow, her face pale. Scarlett forced herself to the nearest late-night clinic, the stolen cash clutched tight. Hours later, a weary doctor delivered the news, a severe lung condition exacerbated by years of poor living conditions and neglect. It wasn't just medicine Aunt Eleanor needed. It was extensive tests, specialized medication, regular visits to a pulmonary specialist, possibly oxygen support. The list went on each item, adding another impossible figure to a rapidly escalating total. Scarlett thanked the doctor numbly, stepping back out into the indifferent city night. The stolen cash felt like worthless paper in her hand. It wouldn't even cover the first round of prescriptions, let alone the ongoing crushing cost of keeping Aunt Eleanor alive. The robbery hadn't been a solution. It had been a single desperate gasp for air before the water closed over her head again. What now? The question echoed in the vast, empty space where hope used to be, and a sliver of unease remained, the memory of the rich man's cold, assessing eyes, his cryptic words. Why hadn't he been scared? What was he really thinking? The shadow of their encounter lingered, a dark premonition she couldn't quite shake. The days following the diagnosis blurred into a grey miasma of futility. Scarlett pounded the pavement again, chasing ghosts of jobs that evaporated upon arrival. Each no was a hammer blow against her dwindling hope. The stolen cash dwindled rapidly, covering only the most immediate medications, a pittance against the mountain of future costs the doctor had outlined. The watch and phone lay hidden, heavy reminders of her desperate gamble. Guilt gnawed at her. Should she try to return them, find the cold-eyed man and beg for, what mercy? Understanding. The thought was ludicrous. More likely he'd hand her straight to the cops. Jail wouldn't help Aunt Eleanor. Lost in this bleak maze of dead ends, walking through a dimly lit street, she barely registered. The world dissolved into sudden, terrifying blackness. There was no struggle, no warning, just the shocking efficiency of a strong arm clamping around her, a damp cloth pressed firmly over her nose and mouth, its sickly sweet scent stealing her consciousness before she could even scream. Scarlett woke with a gasp, her head pounding, the unfamiliar scent of expensive perfume filling her nostrils. Disoriented, she blinked against the soft ambient light. This wasn't the shack, this wasn't a hospital. She was lying on a bed so large and soft it felt like sinking into a cloud. Her hands. She tried to move them tied. Thick, smooth restraints bound her wrists to the ornate headboard. Panic surged, hot and acidic. What the hell? She rasped, yanking futilely against the bonds. Where am I? Let me go. She thrashed, kicking against luxurious sheets. Is this some kind of joke, kidnap for ransom? Bad choice, buddy. I'm broke. You picked the wrong damn girl. The door opened with a near-silent click, and the man who stepped in stole the air from her lungs, freezing the frantic words in her throat. It was him, the man from the alley, impossibly composed, dressed now in a perfectly tailored suit. His sharp eyes assessing her struggles with the same unnerving calm he'd shown when she held a knife to him. So Damien Ashford said, his voice a low, resonant baritone that sent an involuntary shiver down her spine. You're awake. Finally you. Scarlett spat rage, momentarily, eclipsing fear. What is this? Why am I tied up? What do you want? Relax, he advised, though. His tone offered no comfort. I'm not going to hurt you. Not physically, at least. Then untie me. What is this revenge? Justice. Justice is part of it, Damien conceded, strolling closer, his presence dominating the opulent room. You did rob me after all. A rather desperate, poorly executed attempt, but a crime nonetheless. He stopped near the bed, looking down at her, his expression unreadable. But this is more than just retribution. Consider it a mutually beneficial arrangement necessitated by urgency. Scarlett stared at him, bewildered. Mutually beneficial. I'm tied to a bed. A temporary precaution he dismissed with a wave of his hand. Listen closely, Scarlett. I find myself under considerable pressure. A situation requiring immediate decisive action. A situation that quite inconveniently necessitates marriage. Urgently marriage. The word hung in the air, absurd and terrifying. You're insane, she whispered. Marry me. The girl who tried to rob you, precisely. He confirmed a flicker of something. Impatience. Stress. Crossing his features before vanishing behind the mask of control. You, it seems, are also in a desperate situation. Your Aunt Eleanor requires significant ongoing medical care. Expensive care. Scarlett's blood ran cold. How do you know about her? I make it my business to know things that concern me, he stated simply. And your aunt's well-being now concerns me, because it provides your motivation. He leaned in slightly, his voice becoming harder. "Here is the arrangement. You will marry me immediately. In return, I will ensure your aunt receives the absolute best medical care available for as long as she needs it, all expenses covered. Furthermore, the unfortunate incident in the alley will be forgotten." Legally speaking, Scarlett felt dizzy. "And if I refuse," Damien's eyes turned glacial. "If you refuse, I will ensure the full weight of the law comes down on you. Robbery assault with a deadly weapon. It won't be difficult to make the charges stick, and I will make certain the authorities understand that your dear Aunt Eleanor knowingly benefited from the proceeds of your crime." Accessory after the fact carries its own penalties. He laid out the threat with surgical precision, leaving no room for doubt about his capability or ruthlessness. Scarlett's mind reeled. It was monstrous. A violation. Yet, the image of Aunt Eleanor, gasping pale, the crushing weight of those medical bills. Damien watched her internal struggle, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. That flicker of impatience again, his clock was ticking too. "You provide the solution I need. A wife now." He stated flatly, "I provide the solution you need. Your aunt's life, her health, your freedom. It's a transaction, Scarlett. A pact born of necessity." Chu's tears welled hot and angry, but she blinked them back. Showing weakness felt like surrender. The silence stretched thick with tension. Finally, barely audible, she choked out the word, "Fine." A sliver of relief, quickly masked, crossed Damien's face. He nodded once decisively. Wise choice. He produced a small phone, issuing clipped, concise orders. Within minutes, arrangements were being made. An ambulance, a transfer to a prestigious private hospital, consultations with top specialists. He moved with terrifying efficiency, his power manifesting as immediate action. He then had her untied, though guards remained, posted discreetly outside the door. "You will return home briefly," he informed her. "Pack a small bag. Say your goodbyes. You will be escorted. Do not attempt anything foolish." The visit back to the shack was a blur of forced composure. Aunt Eleanor, already prepped for the transfer by paramedics Damien had dispatched, looked frail and confused. Scarlett hugged her tight, murmuring reassurances. She didn't feel unable to explain the impossible bargain she'd struck. The watchful eyes of Damien's men ensured she said nothing incriminating. Then she was whisked away again, this time to Damien Ashford's residence. It wasn't a house. It was a fortress of glass and steel overlooking the city, a monument to staggering wealth, and Scarlett suspected profound isolation. The sheer scale of the place was intimidating, the silence deafening compared to the constant thrum of the Bronx. Every surface gleamed, every object looked priceless and untouchable. It felt less like a home and more like a museum exhibit dedicated to power, later shown to a guest room almost as large as her entire shack. Scarlett felt a surge of defiance. This might be his cage, but she wouldn't be a passive prisoner. That night, when Damien briefly entered the room, assigned as theirs, though cavernous enough for 10 people, he found Scarlett dragging pillows from sofas, chairs, anywhere she could find them, piling them high down the middle of the enormous bed. He stopped raising that infuriatingly perfect eyebrow. "What precisely is this?" Scarlett straightened hands on her hips, meeting his gaze squarely despite the tremor inside her. "This," she declared, gesturing to the ridiculous barrier, "is the Great Wall of Scarlet rules of the House Ashford, your side." She pointed. "And my side. No crossing the border. Got it?" A strange expression flickered in Damien's eyes. Annoyance, perhaps, or maybe even a grudging microscopic hint of something else. Amusement. He merely gave a curt nod. As you wish. Just ensure your fortifications don't impede my access to the ensuite. He turned and left, leaving Scarlett alone, amidst the cold luxury, the pillow wall a small symbolic and utterly pathetic act of defiance against the gilded cage that had just slammed shut around her. She sank onto her side of the bed, the enormity of her situation washing over her. She had bought her aunt's health, but the price was her life, and she was now bound to a man whose calculating eyes held secrets far deeper and colder than she could possibly imagine. Days bled into weeks in the opulent prison Scarlett now called home life, with Damien Ashford settled into a strange, tense rhythm, punctuated by near-constant friction. The sheer size of the mansion meant they could avoid each other for hours, but meals were usually taken together in a dining room, vast enough to host a state dinner filled only with strained silence or barbed exchanges. What exactly is this? Scarlett poked suspiciously at a small, artful swirl of green foam on her plate one evening. Is this moss? Where's the actual food? Ashford, Damien merely sighed, the sound echoing slightly in the cavernous room. It's basil-infused, culinary foam, Scarlett. It accompanies the pan-seared scallops foam, she repeated flatly. Right. Because nothing says hearty meal like flavored air. She missed Aunt Eleanor's simple stews food that filled you up instead of just confusing you. Laundry day was another battleground. Scarlett eyed the sleek, intimidating washing machine Damien insisted she use. Are you sure this thing washes clothes? It looks more complicated than landing a spaceship. Half these buttons are probably for launching missiles. Just press delicates and start, Damien instructed, pinching the bridge of his nose. And please refrain from turning my laundry room into a laundromat with your manual methods. Hey, my manual methods. Get clothes clean without needing an engineering degree, she retorted, though she secretly found the machine's efficiency appealing once she figured it out. Their clashes extended to music, her preferred upbeat pop jarring against his classical ambiance. It sounds like a funeral dirge, Ashford. And decor, does everything have to be beige or grey? It's like living inside a very expensive cloud. The bickering became their primary form of communication, a way to navigate the absurdity of their situation without acknowledging the underlying tension. Beneath the surface of their daily skirmishes, Scarlett began noticing things, small things. She'd sometimes pass his study late at night and hear the low murmur of his voice, sharp and clipped, discussing deadlines and consequences in terse, coded language. The timeline is non-negotiable. Collateral damage is unacceptable. Once she saw him standing by the massive windows overlooking the city, rubbing his temples, a profound weariness etched onto his features when he thought he was alone. She told herself it was just the stress of running his empire, or perhaps lingering annoyance at having her forced upon him. It couldn't possibly be anything deeper. Could it? Then came the day she stumbled upon his birthday. It wasn't announced, wasn't marked anywhere obvious. She saw it listed on a dry legal document left carelessly on a side table in the library. March 31st. Which was today. Something shifted inside her. The idea of this cold, controlled man having a birthday, likely uncelebrated, felt oddly pathetic. A flicker of defiance sparked. Defiance against the sterile perfection of the mansion, against his carefully constructed aloofness, mixed perhaps with a reluctant sliver of empathy. Driven by an impulse she didn't fully understand, Scarlett ventured into the state-of-the-art kitchen, a gleaming expanse of stainless steel that felt more like a laboratory than a place to cook. Using ingredients She had the bewildered household staff procure she baked, a simple carrot cake, her own childhood favorite, made with unfamiliar equipment in surreal surroundings. She even found some basic decorations and balloons, arranging them awkwardly defiantly in the enormous dining room. When Damien returned home that evening, weary from work, Scarlett intercepted him before he could retreat to his study. She held the slightly lopsided cake candles, flickering. "Happy birthday, mister." "Grump," she announced, bracing for his icy dismissal. Damien froze mid-step. His eyes widened almost imperceptibly, taking in the cake, the few scattered balloons, the aroma of home cooking that felt utterly alien in this house. Shock warred with suspicion on his usually unreadable face. "What is this? What does it look like? It's your birthday." "Don't pretend you forgot," she said, trying to sound nonchalant. He seemed momentarily speechless. "How did you? Maybe your giant silent house has secrets," she teased, feeling a strange sense of power in having caught him off guard. "Or maybe I just snooped." He shook his head slowly, a complex emotion swirling in his eyes. "You didn't have to do this. I know." Scarlett said simply, "Blow out the candles before they melt all over my masterpiece." He hesitated. Then, to her surprise, he leaned down and blew them out. A small, genuine smile, the first she'd ever seen directed at her, touched his lips before vanishing. Birthdays were formalities, he said quietly, almost unwillingly, his gaze distant for a moment. "Obligations, not celebrations in my family." It was a tiny crack, a sliver of insight into the man behind the Ashford name offered reluctantly before the walls slammed back into place. "Wow!" Ashford, Scarlett couldn't resist saying, seizing the moment of vulnerability. "Didn't know your face could do that smiling thing." Almost cracked the marble. He shot her a glare, but it lacked its usual heat that night. The atmosphere felt different, charged, later asleep in the vast bed, the great wall of pillows still firmly in place. Scarlett awoke abruptly. She wasn't sure what woke her, but she realized Damien had rolled closer in his sleep, his arm thrown across the pillow barrier, his hand resting inches from hers. She froze, heart pounding. The air crackled with unspoken tension, heightened by the shared vulnerability of the birthday surprise. She carefully slid back to her side, rebuilding the fluffy barricade, but sleep remained elusive. The wedding preparations began in earnest the following week, injecting a new level of surrealism into their lives. A sleek, terrifyingly efficient wedding planner materialized, presenting mood boards and swatches. Scarlett endured fittings for gowns that felt like elaborate torture devices. "Seriously," she complained, struggling for breath inside layers of silk and lace. "This thing costs more than my entire old neighborhood block, and I can practically hear my ribs cracking. How am I supposed to run in this if I change my mind?" "You won't need to run." Damien stated his tone dry as he surveyed her critically. He seemed unusually invested, vetoing certain dates, insisting on specific venues with a rigidity that seemed excessive even for him. They met with his primary business partner, Mr. Donovan, at the mansion. Donovan, an older man with shrewd eyes, observed Scarlett with open curiosity during their brief interaction. Later, Scarlett overheard Donovan speaking privately to Damien. "She's spirited, Damien." "Not quite what I pictured." Damien's reply was a low, dismissive murmur she couldn't catch. The pressure culminated during a tense discussion about the guest list. Scarlett questioned the need for such a vast, impersonal gathering. "Why do we need 500 strangers watching us sign a piece of paper? Ashford. It's ridiculous." Damien's control finally snapped. He slammed a hand down on the polished table, making her jump. "You think this is just about appearances?" He bit out his voice, dangerously low frustration, turning his eyes dark. "The consequences of this wedding, not happening precisely as planned, are far beyond what you could possibly comprehend. This needs to be perfect." He stopped abruptly, seeming to realize what he'd said. The mask of cool indifference momentarily shattered. He visibly composed himself, running a hand through his hair. "The arrangements stand," he said, curtly, ending the conversation. But the damage was done. Scarlett stared at him, his outburst echoing in the sudden silence. Consequences far beyond what you comprehend. What was he hiding? The vague unease she'd felt since their first encounter solidified into sharp suspicion. This sham marriage was built on more than just a cold transaction. It was built on Damien Ashford's secrets, and suddenly Scarlett felt more trapped than ever. Against all odds, moments of fragile connection began to punctuate the tension. Damien, perhaps intrigued by Scarlett's unyielding spirit, or simply starved for genuine interaction, suggested an outing. Not a stuffy gala or a high-powered dinner, but something unexpectedly normal, an evening at a sprawling amusement park just outside the city, which he'd naturally rented out entirely for privacy. Scarlett was initially suspicious, but the sheer childlike wonder of the place, the flashing lights, the music, the towering rides against the twilight sky, chipped away at her defenses. For a few precious hours they weren't captor and captive, billionaire and street rat. They were just two people laughing as they spun on the teacups, competing fiercely at rigged carnival games. Scarlett, to Damien's grudging admiration, proved a surprisingly accurate shot and sharing sticky blue cotton candy. "You know, Ashford," Scarlett said, perched beside him, high atop the Ferris wheel, the entire glittering expanse of New York spread beneath them like scattered jewels. "Sometimes, from way up here, the city almost looks peaceful." "Perspective changes everything," Damien replied, his voice softer than usual. He wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at her, a faint, genuine smile playing on his lips. Sometimes things that seem harsh up close have a different kind of beauty from a distance. He paused. "Kind of like you, maybe all sharp edges, but surprisingly sweet underneath." Before Scarlett could retort, he reached over his fingers, gently brushing away a fleck of blue sugar from the corner of her mouth. The touch lingered electric. Scarlett froze her breath, catching the easy banter, dissolving into palpable tension. His gaze held hers intense and searching. It was the look of a man seeing something he hadn't expected, something he wasn't sure what to do with, but the warmth of those moments only made the cold reality harsher. Back in the sterile silence of the mansion, the connection. Scarlett felt terrified her. It felt real, dangerously real. How could she fall for the man who had essentially bought her life, who held her aunt's well-being in his hands? Was this feeling genuine, or just a product of proximity, a twisted form of Stockholm Syndrome? The uncertainty gnawed at her. What future could they possibly have built on such a foundation of coercion and secrets? His secrets, the ones he guarded so closely, the ones that drove his inexplicable urgency. Fear began to eclipse the budding affection. Scarlett started pulling away, retreating behind walls higher and thicker than any pillow barrier. She became quieter, her witty retorts less frequent. She avoided meeting Damien's increasingly questioning gaze. One afternoon, using a burner phone she'd managed to acquire, she called the private hospital, speaking briefly to Aunt Eleanor. "I don't know what's real anymore," Auntie Scarlett whispered, careful to keep her voice low. He's not what I expected. But this whole situation, I'm scared, Aunt Eleanor, her voice stronger now, thanks to the dedicated care offered simple, cautious words. Trust your heart, child, but be careful. Men with power often hide deep shadows. The conversation solidified Scarlett's resolve. She couldn't stay. She couldn't build a life on shifting sand, constantly wondering about the secrets Damien kept, constantly fearing the power he held over her. She loved him. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. But she couldn't marry him under these circumstances. She had to leave. The night before the meticulously planned wedding, the air crackled with unspoken emotions. Damien, sensing her withdrawal but misinterpreting its cause, sought her out. He found her curled up on a sofa in the vast living room, staring blankly at the city lights. He sat beside her, the silence stretching, filled only by the frantic beating of Scarlett's heart. He gently took her hand, his touch sending tremors through her. "Talk to me, Scarlett." He murmured. "What's wrong?" She couldn't. Instead, she turned to him, desperation and a fierce, heart-breaking tenderness warring within her. When he leaned down, his gaze searching hers, she didn't resist his kiss. It was slow, deep, infused with all the confusion, fear and burgeoning love they hadn't dared to speak. It felt like a promise and a betrayal all at once. Later, tangled together in the darkness, Scarlett clung to him, memorizing the feel of his arms around her, the rhythm of his breathing, etching the bittersweet memory onto her soul. It was goodbye. Dawn broke, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and grey. While Damien slept oblivious, Scarlett moved with a stealth born of desperation. She dressed quickly, packed the small bag she'd kept ready. One last lingering look at the man sleeping peacefully. His harsh features, softened in repose, tore at her heart. She placed a simple folded note on his pillow. "I'm sorry I can't live a lie. Don't look for me." Then slipping out like a ghost. She was gone. Damien awoke to emptiness. The space beside him was cold. Then he saw the note. He read it once, twice, the words blurring. A strangled sound escaped him, raw and broken. The carefully constructed walls around his emotions didn't just crack, they imploded. He swept a lamp off the bedside table, the crash echoing the shattering devastation inside him. This wasn't annoyance. This wasn't inconvenience. This was visceral, gut-wrenching loss. He was on the phone instantly, his voice tight with controlled fury and underlying panic, barking orders at his security team. Find her. Track the car she must have arranged. Access traffic cameras. Mobilize everything. His pursuit wasn't calculated now. It was primal, driven by a terrifying fear that went far deeper than a derailed business plan. Hours later, his high-performance car ate up the miles, racing towards the sleepy upstate town his team had tracked her to. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel, his mind racing, haunted by the very consequences he desperately tried to avoid. Losing her wasn't just losing a pawn, it felt like losing the only anchor he'd found in a lifetime of carefully managed storms. He found the small rustic rental house just as dusk settled. He practically kicked the door open after his sharp knock went unanswered. Scarlett stood there, silhouetted against the warm interior light, her eyes widening in shock, then hardening with anger and fear. "What are you doing here?" she cried, stepping back. Just leave me alone." "I can't," Damien stated, his voice raw, stepping inside, crowding her space. "I won't." "Why not?" she challenged, shoving futilely against his chest. "Go back to your perfect life, your business deals, we're done." This whole thing was a lie. It wasn't all a lie. He countered, his control fraying completely. "Not for me. Not anymore." Then why, she screamed, tears finally breaking free, hot and furious. Why force me into this? Why all the secrets, the pressure? Because I had no choice. The words ripped out of him, torn from a place of deep desperation. He gripped her arms, his eyes blazing with an intensity that stunned her into silence. Because Thorpe, my father's old rival, found leverage a mistake from years ago, tied to a family trust. Because if I didn't secure a marriage, any marriage by that specific deadline, he would expose a secret that would destroy my mother, ruin everything my family ever built. He took a ragged breath, the carefully constructed dam finally breaking, and because his voice cracked raw with an emotion she'd never heard from him before. Despite everything, despite how it started, despite fighting it every damn step of the way, I fell in love with you, Scarlett. He didn't stop there, the painful truth pouring out in a torrent. The coldness, the control. It was armor, Scarlett, protection. After my father died, the betrayals. I learned to trust no one to control everything. Using you, threatening your aunt. His face contorted with self-loathing. It was despicable, monstrous. But I was trapped, backed into a corner, and I saw no other way out of the storm Thorpe was unleashing. He finally released her arms, stepping back, looking utterly exposed, stripped bare of his power and control. I love you. He repeated the words, hanging heavy in the stunned silence, thick with pain, regret and desperate sincerity. Scarlett stared at him, reeling. The love confession was shocking enough, but the revelation of his hidden torment, the painful secret driving his ruthless actions, it changed everything. Anger still simmered, the violation still stung, but beneath it, a confusing wave of empathy washed over her. She saw not just the calculating billionaire, but a man haunted by his past, trapped by circumstance, who had made terrible choices out of desperation, just like her. The truth lay between them, raw and bleeding. Could she ever forgive the methods? Could she possibly trust the love born from such a twisted beginning? The raw honesty of Damien's confession hung heavy in the small upstate cottage, thick with unspoken questions and years of his concealed pain. Scarlett didn't rush to offer forgiveness. The hurt ran deep, the sense of violation still sharp. She needed space-time to process the whirlwind of revelations, the desperate love, the calculated coercion, the hidden vulnerability. She retreated into the quiet solitude of the house, leaving Damien adrift on the porch. He didn't push, he didn't demand. He simply stayed. Initially, he slept awkwardly in his expensive car. A silent sentinel parked just beyond the overgrown garden. Then, perhaps realizing the absurdity, he took to the lumpy couch on the screened-in porch, a billionaire incongruously wrapped in a borrowed quilt against the night chill. His presence was constant, but unobtrusive, a quiet testament to his refusal to leave. Days unfolded tentatively. He started clumsily at first, to make himself useful. He'd appear with bags of groceries left silently by the door. He attempted to fix the perpetually dripping kitchen faucet, resulting in a spray of water that soaked him, and prompted a reluctant chuckle from Scarlett, watching through the window. "Ashford," she called out, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed, a ghost of her old fire returning. "Are you trying to fix the leak or give the kitchen a shower?" He emerged, dripping and looking utterly defeated by basic plumbing. "Apparently," he said, running a hand through his wet hair, a wry twist to his lips, "my talents lie elsewhere." Another day determined to contribute, he tackled the small woodpile needed for the old fireplace. Scarlett found him struggling awkwardly with the axe, his movements stiff and inefficient compared to the easy swing of a seasoned local. "You hold it like you're afraid it'll bite you," she commented. Stepping out, after a moment's hesitation, she showed him the proper stance, the right way to bring the axe down. There was an odd intimacy in the simple instruction, a flicker of their old dynamic, her grounded practicality against his unfamiliarity with anything outside his polished world. The humor was gentle, born from his awkward efforts rather than sharp antagonism. More importantly than the chores, however, was that Damien listened when Scarlett finally haltingly began to speak, pouring out her residual anger, her fear, the bitter taste of having been manipulated. He didn't interrupt. He didn't make excuses. He simply sat, absorbing her words, his gaze steady, acknowledging the pain he'd caused. "You had every right to run," he said quietly, during one difficult conversation on the porch steps, the crickets chirping around them. "You have every right to still be angry. What I did, how I used your situation, threatened your aunt. There's no excuse for it, Scarlett. None." This quiet acceptance, this refusal to justify his past actions, chipped away at her defenses more effectively than any grand gesture could have. They started talking more. Awkward, hesitant conversations, at first navigating the minefield of their complicated history. They spoke of fears, of the loneliness he'd hidden beneath his wealth, of the crushing responsibility she'd shouldered for so long. It wasn't easy, but it felt real. Communication, fragile and new, began to build a tentative bridge between them. Then came the concrete actions. One afternoon, Damien sat with Scarlett on the porch, a tablet in his hand. "I spoke with my lawyers this morning," he said, his voice calm, serious. "I've established an irrevocable trust fund for Aunt Eleanor. It covers all her current and future medical needs, living expenses, everything. It's completely independent, Scarlett untouchable, managed by a neutral third party." He met her gaze directly. "Using her health as leverage against you was the lowest thing I've ever done. This is to ensure it can never happen again. Her security is absolute, regardless of us." Scarlett felt a knot loosen in her chest, one she hadn't realized she was holding so tightly. It wasn't just words, it was action, a tangible undoing of the worst part of his initial coercion. He didn't stop there. She saw him making calls, his tone decisive, different from the tense conversations she'd overheard before. He spoke of renegotiating terms, of facing consequences, head-on regarding the Thorpe situation. He'd confessed to making it clear he was choosing a different path, one not reliant on the forced marriage. His priorities were visibly shifting. He also arranged a video call with Aunt Eleanor. Seeing her aunt's face looking brighter and healthier in the comfortable private room brought fresh tears to Scarlett's eyes. They spoke tearfully, Scarlett sharing a carefully edited version of events. Eleanor listened patiently. "He's still there, child?" she asked gently, perhaps noticing Damien's shadow passing in the background, where he respectfully kept his distance. Scarlett nodded. "Love isn't about perfect beginnings, Scarlett," Eleanor said softly. "Lord knows life rarely gives us those. It's about how people show up when things get hard, how they try to mend what's broken. Does he show up truly?" Eleanor's simple wisdom resonated deeply. Damien was showing up consistently, humbly. He was actively mending what he had broken, slowly, cautiously. Scarlett allowed herself to believe it wasn't a sudden epiphany, but a gradual thawing, a recognition of his sustained effort, his genuine remorse, his willingness to be vulnerable and accountable. The handsome billionaire attempting clumsy chores was one thing. The powerful man actively dismantling the structures of his own manipulation was another entirely. They walked into the nearby small town one afternoon to pick up supplies. Locals greeted Scarlett with easy familiarity. Their curiosity towards the out-of-place suited man beside her friendly rather than hostile. Damien navigated the simple interactions awkwardly but politely, a world away from the commanding presence he projected in the city. It felt peaceful, normal. That evening, sitting on the porch swing as twilight painted the sky, they reached a quiet understanding. "I want to try, Damien," Scarlett said softly, finally meeting his hopeful gaze without flinching. "Really try back there in your world. But as partners equals." A slow smile spread across Damien's face, reaching his eyes, erasing years of guarded tension. "Equals," he confirmed, his voice thick with emotion. He then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thin file. "Then this is the first step." He handed it to her. Inside were the official documents confirming the establishment and funding of Aunt Eleanor's irrevocable trust. There was also a letter from his legal team outlining the formal steps being taken to address the Thorpe situation, head-on severing its connection to their relationship entirely. "Transparency, Scarlett," he said quietly, holding her gaze. "Accountability. From now on, this is proof." She looked from the papers to his earnest face. This wasn't just a promise. It was evidence. He had not only confessed his truth, but he was actively rebuilding the foundations between them on solid ground, brick by painful, honest brick. The trust she thought irrevocably broken began cautiously to mend. "Okay, Ashford," she murmured, a tentative smile touching her own lips. "Okay, let's go home." Returning to New York City was different this time. The towering Ashford mansion no longer felt like a cage, but a space Scarlett navigated with a quiet confidence that surprised even herself. Damien, true to his word, treated her not as an obligation or a conquest, but as a partner. He sought her opinion on everything from redecorating a wing of the house, needs less beige, Ashford, seriously, to handling a difficult staff matter. When a visiting socialite made a condescending remark clearly aimed at Scarlett during a small gathering, Damien hosted, he didn't hesitate, shutting the woman down with an icy politeness that left no doubt about Scarlett's position as his equal, his chosen partner. One evening, to Scarlett's amusement and trepidation, Damien announced he was making good on his promise from the country. Tonight, he declared, rolling up the sleeves of an expensive shirt as he surveyed the intimidatingly professional kitchen. "I cook for you." Scarlett perched on a stool, watching the ensuing chaos with poorly concealed glee. "Careful, Ashford," she teased, as he frowned fiercely at an onion knife held awkwardly. "Don't declare war on the vegetables. They're innocent bystanders in this." Despite a near miss involving an overzealous smoke alarm and a sauce that threatened to achieve sentience, the resulting meal was astonishingly delicious. "Okay," Scarlett conceded, taking another bite. "Not bad, Chef Ashford. Maybe you have hidden talents after all." Damien beamed, prouder of that simple compliment than any multi-million-dollar deal. Aunt Eleanor, now fully recovered and comfortably settled in a sunny apartment Damien had arranged nearby, insisting it was part of rectifying his past wrongs, became a frequent and welcome visitor. Seeing her healthy, happy, and fussing over wedding details brought Scarlett a profound sense of peace. Eleanor's initial wariness towards Damien had melted away, replaced by genuine affection, as she witnessed his unwavering devotion to Scarlett. "He looks at you like you hung the moon, child," she whispered to Scarlett one afternoon, patting her hand, her eyes shining with approval. Even the minor loose end of Mrs. Agnes found a quiet resolution. During a phone call, Aunt Eleanor mentioned casually, Mrs. Agnes asked about her washing again. I told her my doctor insists I take it easy now, and my niece agrees wholeheartedly. Funny. I saw her down the street later, rubbing her own back. Something fierce. Scarlett smiled, a small, satisfying consequence. They planned their wedding together. It was still an elegant affair. Damien insisted on quality, but it was infused with Scarlett's personality. Simple wildflowers adorned the tables alongside sophisticated centerpieces. The guest list was smaller, more intimate, including a few trusted friends Scarlett had reconnected with from her past, alongside Damien's business associates. Like Mr. Donovan, who watched the couple with open warmth, the ceremony itself, held in a beautiful old cathedral, bathed in afternoon light, felt worlds away from the rushed, hollow arrangements of before. As Scarlett walked down the aisle, meeting Damien's intense, loving gaze, there was no fear, only certainty. Their vows, spoken clearly, echoed with the weight of their journey. Damien began, his voice thick with emotion. Scarlett, we began in shadows and secrets born of my desperation and mistakes. I used power when I should have offered kindness. But you fought back. You showed me a strength I didn't know existed. You taught me trust when I thought it impossible, forgiveness when I least deserved it. I stand here today, not because of any contract, but because I choose you freely, wholly as my partner. My equal, my love, I promise you, transparency, unwavering support, and a lifetime of trying to be worthy of the light you brought into my life. Scarlett's own tears flowed freely as she replied, her voice trembling but strong. Damien, I saw only a cold, powerful man I was forced upon. I ran from you fearing a connection I couldn't understand. But you pursued me not with power, but with patience, with vulnerability. You showed me the man behind the armor, the heart beneath the ice. You stayed, you listened. You earned my trust peace, by painful, honest peace. Today, I choose you not out of obligation, but with all my heart. I promise to meet your honesty with my own, to build our future on the truth we fought so hard to find, and to love you fiercely always. Aunt Eleanor beamed from the front row as they exchanged rings sealing their union not just legally, but emotionally, finally equals in a love story that had defied its own twisted beginnings. Years past, the Ashford mansion, once a symbol of cold isolation, now echoed with laughter. The bright, infectious giggles of their daughter Isabel. She was a whirlwind of energy, possessing Scarlett's fiery spirit, and Damien's intense focus, a combination that kept them both on their toes. One sunny afternoon, they found Isabel barely 4 years old, standing proudly atop Damien's antique mahogany desk, in the study, arranging his important papers into castles. "Isabel Ashford," Scarlett exclaimed, half laughing, half horrified. "Get down from there! This instant!" Damien scooped their daughter up, settling her on his hip. Apparently, he said, sharing an amused look with Scarlett over Isabel's indignant protests. "She's inherited your penchant for disregarding established boundaries, and your tendency to think you own the place," Scarlett retorted, pressing a kiss to Isabel's unruly curls, her heart full. Later that evening, curled up together on a balcony overlooking the glittering city skyline that once seemed so alien and hostile, Scarlett leaned her head against Damien's shoulder. The peace between them was deep and comfortable, forged in fire and settled into enduring warmth. "Who knew," Scarlett murmured, watching the distant lights, "that trying to rob someone in a dark alley could somehow lead?" To this, Damien wrapped his arm tighter around her. "It wasn't the robbery, Scarlett," he said softly, his voice resonating with the truth they both now understood. That was just the desperate spark. It was everything that came after. The fight, the mistakes, the painful honesty, the choice to forgive, to trust, to rebuild. That's what led to this. He tilted her chin up his eyes, holding hers, filled with a love that needed no further explanation. In the quiet understanding that passed between them, the enduring message of their story resided. That true love wasn't found in perfection, but in the messy, difficult, beautiful process of seeing beyond flaws, fighting for connection, and choosing every single day to build a legacy of trust and forgiveness together. Mr. Hope's narration. And that, dear listeners, is the story of Scarlett and Damien. A reminder that sometimes the most unexpected paths lead to the most profound destinations, and that love, when nurtured with honesty and courage, can truly conquer all. My name is Mr. Hope, and I'll see you soon. What a journey that was, from the desperation of a dark alley to the fragile beginnings of trust. Scarlett and Damien truly walked through fire together. It leaves you wondering, doesn't it? How much can a foundation cracked by secrets and coercion truly bear before it collapses, or before it's rebuilt painstakingly into something even stronger on pillars of honesty? Their story reminds us that sometimes the deepest connections are forged, not in spite of the hardships, but because of the courage it takes to face them, forgive, and choose to trust again. This intricate path from manipulation to mutual love certainly gave us a lot to reflect on. If their emotional journey resonated with you too, we'd love to hear your perspective. Considering the painful truth Damien revealed, and the concrete steps he took to atone, did his actions truly balance the scales for you? Could you forgive in Scarlett's place? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Engaging with these complex questions is what brings these stories to life. We also deeply value your perspective and strive to make these stories better with each telling. Was there a moment that particularly touched you, or perhaps a part of their journey you wished was explored differently? Please share your constructive feedback. It's incredibly helpful and truly motivates us to grow. If Scarlett and Damien's story touched your heart, please give this video a like. And if you feel their journey towards earned trust might resonate with someone you know, consider sharing it. For more stories, exploring complex connections, unexpected second chances, and the enduring power of hope and forgiveness, make sure to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell. That way, you won't miss the next emotional journey we share together. Thank you for spending this time with us. My name is Mr. Hope, and I'll see you soon.